Hello, it's Michelle and Chris from Maxwell Coaching, doing our Friday night Q&A.
And it's Friday night, so cheers.
So if you got a drink, then that's cool. So what we thought...
Non-alcoholic drinks are fine.
Absolutely. So what we thought we would do is chat a little bit about stuff that's happening, ping us any questions as we're going along, and if not, we've got a few things that we'd quite like to talk about. So we thought we would talk a little bit about sleep, because that's something that we've not been doing a lot of. A little bit of stress, I suppose, having to book slots for parents in the middle of the night for shopping.
That's true. Thank you, Tesco's. Opening your slots at midnight. That's really helpful.
Not great. Hi, Jason. Yo, Jason. Sleep. Really important, obviously, and something that I know quite a few people are struggling with. We coach quite a few people who work on the front line in the NHS, and obviously they've had a few nights where they've been obviously very anxious and worried about what's going to happen, worried about going to work and taking, illnesses home. So it's understandable. And we've both had similar experiences. Chris with his day job, me because I've been told I'm in the vulnerable category, which really surprised me. And then just all of the other stuff like, as an athlete, what am I training for? Should I be doing this? Am I making myself too tired? Lots of questions like that. And
you're having to get up early as well.
I'm having to get up early to do my running, which I don't like doing, but actually I'm getting used to it. I think my body clock's adjusting. And I think that's really important. And I think actually trying to figure out why you're not sleeping, I think, is the first step. And I think, the thing that's working for me is avoiding looking at news, avoiding too much social media, avoiding reading too much about it. And, in the evenings, just switching off, so spending time with the family. Obviously doing my sport, that's helping me, not avoiding getting fresh air. On the bin already, Mr. Maxwell. Absolutely, Nicola. It is Friday. And I think trying to switch off from what is happening. Yes, I think we all need to kind of know what is going on, but I think you don't need to tap into it all the time. I think actually what you need to do is focus on what's important in your life. And I think you've just got to focus on your family, use the time you've got with your family, and just try and turn it into a positive experience as opposed to a negative one. It actually doesn't bash at this. Yeah, so Jason's, we'll come on to that in a minute, Jace, all right? Because that's a really interesting point about high intensity. So let's just finish up on the sleep. If anyone's got any sleep questions, we can come back to that in a minute. Yes, you can have a drink, You can have a drink, Nikki. I think you deserve one after this week. The sleep, I just think switch off, try and get some fresh air. I think even if, you just go for a walk, if you don't feel like going running, go and just get some fresh air. I think at the moment, we're really lucky with the weather. It's absolutely beautiful weather. Just go out for a lovely walk. If you feel like going for a jog, go for a jog. Obviously, we talked about cycling last week. People are still going out on their bikes, but I would just be careful, obviously. Don't go hell for leather. Go on a route that is got well-surfaced roads, and just, don't go too far from home. I think that's the key thing. I think anything else to add to that?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think all you can do is just try and switch off from what's happening by reading a book before bed. Don't look at your phone.
I think the 10 o'clock news is bad, actually.
Yeah,
if you watch that, then you struggle to switch off from it all. So.
Yeah, I think watch a movie, switch off, obviously a nice, happy movie, not a horrible movie, and, that sort of thing. I think we just got to switch off from it as much as we can and just tune in when it's important to tune in to the positive sides of it. So So Jason's point. So Jason's suggested, and he's read a few papers, and there is a lot of papers out there about this at the minute, about high intensity, and obviously we're wanting to protect our immune systems as much as possible. It is suggested that the peak is about to happen. Whether that's true, we don't know. So I think with the high intensity training, I think high intensity training is fine actually, and I think that is a great way of keeping yourself motivated. So there's loads of high intensity, workouts that you do on YouTube. They're great. I've been joining in with Joe Wicks, which is a little bit high intensity, gets your heart rate going. It's a bit different for me. I don't usually do that sort of stuff.
Joe doesn't get my heart rate going.
You need to grow your hair.
Especially in his Spider-Man outfit.
You need to grow your hair. His abs were very good this morning. And I think really, I think it's great. I think high intensity, yes, it raises your heart rate quite high. And we do, obviously, as runners and triathletes, we do quite a lot of things like high intensity turbos. We do speed sessions. And I think at the minute, the evidence is out there to say those sessions are fine. They do not impact your immune system in the way that you would possibly think that they do. You feel quite tired quite quickly after those sessions, but you recover quite quickly from them. I think that is the key thing. What is not a great thing to do at the minute is to go out and do a 20-mile run at high intensity. So don't go and do a 20-mile run at marathon pace. That is the sort of session. High tempo, pushing your body into the grey zone, as we call it. That isn't a great thing to do. And the same thing on the bike, I think. You've just got to be a little bit careful.
You can use Training Peaks as a stress score to kind of guide you on this. So if you look at kind of quite short, in high intensity sessions, they don't actually necessarily have a huge stress score, so you can recover from them relatively quickly. Obviously, you don't want to do them every single day. It's as Michelle says, the long duration stuff, particularly if you're raising your heart rate towards, sort of zone 3 type of area, then that's going to have a high stress score, and that could impact your immune system, particularly if you don't recover well.
Yeah.
So I think the training stress score is a little bit controversial and not necessarily the be-all and end-all, but it is a good guide. So I think the important thing is, HIIT is fine, but you don't want to be doing it every single day. You want some of those recovery runs, recovery cycles, sort of zone 1, zone 2 type of stuff in between those. And I think that's an important point now when we're, particularly the cyclists amongst us, if we're on Zwift or what have you, the tendency is to do sessions or sort of race people on Zwift or whatever, because actually a steady ride is pretty boring indoors. And so you can end up doing most of your cycling
Hi, Linda.
at higher intensity stuff. So I think that's an important point that we ought to try and
make
sure.
Hi, Neil.
Yeah. Have you got a beer yet, Neil?
No answer to that yet. Yeah, I think that's the key thing, and it brings us on to a subject we were going to talk about in a minute, I think, is that zone, that easy stuff. How easy should you actually be training? And we've been asked that a lot. I've had a couple of questions. He's on his beer, look, Lou.
Oh, right. Here's Neil.
So I think really important, and particularly at the minute, if you're going to go and do some long runs, and by that I wouldn't go out and do 30 milers at the moment, because I think more than anything you're just at risk of having an accident or doing something, to hurt yourself.
Beer.
And I think really important, stay close to home, obviously, and keep those easy runs easy. The long runs easy. I think that's the really important thing. Do not be tempted to push your heart rate into any dangerous zones. Even up the hills, just try and keep it easy so that you do recover quickly. And I think possibly, as we've talked about with the ultra runners last week, is if you are, a lot of the races haven't been cancelled yet, and so there's constant questions. Should I keep training for, these 100 milers, these 50Ks? Well, the true answer is we don't really know. So we're just trying to maintain enough fitness in case they're not cancelled, but obviously not depleting. I don't have to do a 30-mile run. No, Nicola, but you do longer runs, and I think that's important. If you go out for yourself, if you go and do a 12-mile run, for example, obviously just keep it really easy. Don't be tempted to push the pace at the moment. I think that's the crucial thing. So all long runs, I think at the moment, don't be tempted to stick in, big blocks of marathon pace like we would do in a marathon training block. Don't be tempted to do that. It does, if you do 10 miles at marathon pace at the moment, you are just pushing yourself a little bit too much into that red zone. And that is the sort of session you don't recover from quickly. And that is the sort of session that puts your immune system into a little bit of depression. And then you're possibly at risk if the virus is around. So,
but also, the idea behind Zone 2 training, aerobic training, is developing the aerobic system.
Absolutely.
And the fat burning systems that enable us to run or bike for a long time. So if you don't do that, you will miss out a big chunk of that aerobic system training.
Yeah.
So that's still important.
Yeah. So Neil's just put up his main aim of his year has been postponed, which is absolutely devastating. So you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I suppose we still don't know whether it'll happen in September or not. But we're all obviously going through that at the moment. It is very frustrating and hard to keep the focus. So I think all we can do, as you kind of just said, really, is try and maintain fitness, and some of the things we said last week, work on your weaknesses, strength and conditioning and things like that, and we'll monitor it and hopefully find some other goals towards the end of the season. And hopefully some of our races will, I think September and maybe in October, are going to be crammed of stuff. So
even if they go ahead.
Hopefully they'll go ahead, and there will be some goals there. So more cake and beer.
Less of the cake, Neil. Less of the cake at the minute. Less of the cake.
So it goes back to what we were saying last week: is enjoy our training and ideally work on our weaknesses. Now's the time to do it, really.
Absolutely. And the nice thing about doing your zone 1 and zone 2 is they are very much in that fat burning zone. So in that sense, you can trot along and feel like you are keeping that calorie count down. Do you know what I mean? And you can earn your little treats, because I think at the minute we all need to have treats just to keep ourselves pecked up. It's nice to have a glass of wine. It's nice to have, a bit of an Easter egg at Easter, some chocolate and stuff like that. So I think if you can get out in the fresh air in whatever means and burn a few calories, then marvellous. I just think that it just keeps you nothing about less beer.
Well, given your coach is drinking.
I've lost track now. I think Bev's put a question up.
No, Richard put about how many times should we do strength training and kind of when, I suppose.
Where did Rich put that?
A bit further that way.
Up,
No,
down.
Down there. No.
No.
Oh, I don't know where it is now.
Bev's put there.
Oh, right, and there's Bev then. Sorry.
Yeah. So Bev has put, how often would you recommend to do a specific weight session as part of your S&C, and should we avoid weights before any particular sessions? So really good question, Bev. At the moment, well, actually it applies for all the time, actually. I think we have, unless you've got access to a home gym with a barbell, nobody's going to be lifting any particularly heavy weights at the moment. So unless you can pack a rucksack, and I was chatting to Belinda about this in the week actually, because she was worrying about where to get some weights from. And I think what you could do is, if you've got a strong hold all at home, if you've got some bags of compost in the garden or sand or any sort of heavy stuff at home, bricks lying around in the garden, fill up some bottles of water, anything, and then you can pad it all out a little bit. You can either put it in a rucksack, so you might need a bit of padding if you're going to put it in a rucksack, and put it on your back, so that's great for doing squats and stuff with, or calf raises, building up the weight that way. And obviously if you've got a big holdall, you could fill it with some weight, and you can do deadlifts and stuff like that with the holdall. So there are ways of getting around it. Obviously, if you've got scales at home, you can weigh exactly how much it is, the weight you're lifting. As for specific weight session as part of your S&C, yes, I think once you have perfected the exercises, so I wouldn't go using weights with your squats and stuff until you know your squats are good. Because if you go and lift a weight and you've got a massive curve in your spine or your knees are pinching in, then you're just going to add extra weight to the errors, and obviously that will probably lead to injury. So I think perfect all the exercises first. The same with calf raises. If you can't do 10 to 20 single leg calf raises, you really shouldn't be adding weight. So that's the first step, is to obviously with all of these things make sure your body weight is good, and then just add the weight. And I think at the minute you just need to build it up. I wouldn't do heavy sessions the day before you're going to do a speed session, for example.
Or the day of, or certainly just before anyway.
On the day of. The day before is sometimes, if it's a really heavy session, your legs are going to be a little bit tired. So you're not going to perform in the same way. And the same with cycling. I think you just be very aware if you've loaded your quads really heavily and then you want to do a hard session on the bike, you're just not going to be able to do it. So just be very aware of that. And I always say, if you've got time to do it and you aren't too tired after a session, do your heavier stuff on your hard days and then your easier stuff on your easy days. And that way you're making sure you're getting your hard easies, in the right pattern.
But there is some evidence, I think, of making sure there's a gap between your aerobic training and your strength training. So ideally, at least 3 hours. Yeah,
definitely. So just make sure that you're not overloading all the time and that you can recover. I think that's the key message.
Mm-hmm.
So avoid weights obviously before high intensity sessions and probably before long runs. I hope that answers that. Let's scroll down. Perhaps actually do S&C. Jason's put yes.
That's good.
Really good. So do your S&C, particularly at the minute. If you've been commuting to work, then suddenly you've got this extra hour either side of the day. So use the time. I think that's a really important thing. Really use the time that you've been given. It's quite precious. I think that would be my message. Nicola's put she does S&C in 15-minute slots. I think that's great. You don't need to do great big hour sessions. Break it down into little slots. If that's 5 to 10 minutes, and that's great. You can do quite a lot in 5 minutes. Don't feel you've got to, ram in a whole 30 minutes. Just, break it up and vary the exercises you do through the week. And then if you've done a good array of each part of your body through the week, then you've done really well.
I remember Simon Ward saying, while the kettle's boiling, you can do some calf raises, and while you take a break from the computer an hour's time, do another session. So you can just fit it in around your working day. Yeah.
I always used to do squatting while Sophie was in the bath. and planks. So
Charlotte's asked a good question there about 11-year-olds running. Very, very interesting question, and the usual answer of it depends probably applies.
And 8-year-old she's put.
Oh, and an 8-year-old as well.
And 8-year-old, so we can put them together.
Oh, yeah. So I think it does depend. I think when you look at some of the Kenyans, they run quite long distances quite early on. I would go on the side of caution. I would look at what else they're doing, if they're playing, in normal circumstances, not necessarily now, but if they're playing football, rugby, some of the kids can be really quite busy with all the other sports. So actually, they might only need 1 or 2 run sessions a week. One of those could be an aerobic run. I typically say you probably don't want to do much more than sort of half-hour running for an aerobic run.
Yeah, definitely.
And then, ideally...
For an 8-year-old, probably a bit less than that, 20 minutes.
Yeah, Sophie did 20 minutes the other day, didn't she?
15, 20 minutes most.
I think, ideally then as well, a sort of speed stroke technique session, so trying to get them to do some drills.
Yeah.
With the TriStars, we tend to do a lot of games type stuff, so just keeping it fun, particularly the 8-year-old. For TriStars, we wouldn't do any sort of aerobic or specific run sessions as part of our club session, we would just keep it real fun and tag and bulldog and all those sort of things. And that's just great. They end up working for an hour without really knowing it.
Yeah, and if you are going to take kids on a run, I think the key thing is to just keep it really fun. So, for example, we live in the countryside, you go over stiles, you mess around in the water, you know what I mean? Just make it not seem like they're out for a long run. I just think really make it, a fun time to be outside. I think that's the most important thing. You took Sophie across the field yesterday. It was great fun, didn't you?
Yeah.
The wildlife and flowers and things like that. And that's great. I think that's all that's needed. Yeah, she occasionally, our 9-year-old Sophie does, well, she's nearly 10 now. Does the big park run, but I certainly wouldn't let her do it very often. And we very much run at her pace. She drives the speed. If she's not really in the mood, we just trot along, have fun. And if she is, then we go for it a little bit more. So I think really just be driven by what they want to do, and don't push them into doing distances that they really don't need to do. I think until the age of 12, they really shouldn't be running, 5Ks regularly. So,
and I think particularly with our lot, is they swim a lot as well. So they'll swim 2 or 3 times a week, which is great for aerobic, and obviously it's low impact as well.
Yeah.
So if they like swimming, then that is a good supplement to it.
Yeah, I think just focus, if they are going to focus on running, I think technique, running drills, because this is the age where they can really learn really good running patterns. And I think if you can get it into them now, then, they'll develop in the right way as an adult runner. So, and obviously you don't want to put them off. If you do too much as youngsters, by the time they get to 14, they'll have had enough and they won't want to do any more. You kind of got to keep them a bit hungry for it. I think that's the most important thing as well.
And Sophie does a 3-6-5 session at Bath, which is throws, sprints and everything.
Hurdles, everything.
So she enjoys that.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Cans of beer. Zara's watching, nor would I. Do weights with my squats. My glutes and hamstrings are awful and tight. What can I do to help them? Hi, Zara. I think hamstrings and glutes do get really tight. But I think what you really need to do is work them. I think what the mistake a lot of people make is they try and stretch them. And it relieves a little bit of tightness, but that probably goes away within 12 hours. So probably even less than that. So it might feel good at the time and it might make you think, oh yeah, that feels better. And it probably helps you to relax. I think that's a really good thing. But it's not going to help in the long run because you're not actually stretching the muscles. So what you really need to do is to get into a really good routine of doing proper glute sessions, really working the glutes, and then you could maybe do some yoga afterwards where you really stretch the glutes out afterwards. But if you're doing that, you might actually get a little bit more flexibility into those glutes and hamstrings. Hamstrings get tight generally because glutes aren't firing properly. So that comes back to making sure you're doing your glute sessions properly. And we're not just talking about doing, your glute bridges and, the things that are glute isolation exercises. What you really need to work on as well is the more movement-driven glute exercises. So things like your band walks, definitely things like squats, lunges, they all actually work what we call the posterior chain, and that's what you really need to be working on to strengthen it up. You need to get those glutes firing a little bit more so the hamstrings don't take over. I think that's the most important thing, is just to really get into a habit of doing a good lot of strength and conditioning 3 or 4 times a week and really focus on it. I think that's probably the best thing.
And I think we'd like to see a video of Nick mastering the wobble cushion one-legged exercise.
Yes, I think we need to see that, Nicola.
Send a video in, please.
Yeah, that'd be great. What you need to then progress onto, Nikki, is doing like balance warriors on the cushion as well. Yeah, that'd be great. Show off. Any questions? And roll square down. Won't be too long before Sophie leaves behind.
That's true. I was struggling to keep up with her.
Hip mobility. So Bev has said hip mobility. So yeah, hip mobility is great. Lots of stuff like your hip drops where you're standing on a step and it doesn't feel like you're doing a lot, but actually it's really strengthening up the hips. So you stand on a step, put your fingers on your hips, and then you just drop your hips down, and it actually is strengthening the stabilizing muscles in your hips. That's a really good movement. It doesn't feel like it's doing a lot. Your band walks, so you put the little bands, like loop bands around your knees, and you do monster walks and lateral steps, like they call crab walks. They, I think, are one of the best glute firing exercises that there are around, to be honest.
And so for those of you on the Chippenham Try page, the reason I'm wearing this is I've just done a video on those exercises.
Yeah.
So that answers Nikki's question as well. I've done 5 good glute exercises, which I'll put on the Chippenham Try page later on. And of course, for those of you on the Maxwell Coaching Hub, they'll be on there as well.
And I think if you've mastered your balance, Nikki, I think one of the best exercises, I think, for getting the glutes firing, but you do need to be able to stand on one leg and control it, is doing the single leg deadlift. So you put a weight on the floor and you go into a balance warrior, so you have one leg behind you and you pick the weight up, almost like a nodding donkey. So you pick the weight up, and when you kick the leg back each time, and you bring it up, so you bring your leg up into a high knee, and then you kick it back as you put the weight down and you pick up the weight. That is one of the best running specific glute activation and strengthening exercises there is, I think. But obviously you do need to be able to balance on one leg to do it. The donkey kick actually is pretty equivalent, but obviously you're supported on the floor. So again, that's a really, really useful exercise, particularly if you do the full motion where you bring your knee forwards and then drive it back. Okay, and if like in Zara's case, if your hamstring takes over, bend at the knee, and it makes sure that you isolate the glute muscle a bit more. Okay.
Well, we've probably got a couple minutes, so is there anything else last?
Lots of talking about Sophie. Any other questions before we finish? If not, as we were just talking about zone 2, I think the key thing when you're doing your long runs and long bikes is to go slower than you think you should go. I think that's the most important thing. You can't go slow enough, actually, on some of these long runs.
Certainly, yeah, some good evidence for that.
And just keep an eye on your heart rate. So you should not be out of breath too much. You should be
good. You could hold a really good conversation. If you can do that, you're in the right zone.
Hold a conversation. If you're really chatting to your mates, you're probably in the right zone. And you should be, if you know your heart rate zones, then that's a really good thing to check. Most people are on, Garmin or something like that, and the zones are kind of organised for them. Find out what your zone 1 and zone 2 is. So your easy recovery run should be in zone 1. And that's, the proper bottom zone, and that is a recovery run pace. So if you've done a hard speed session, the next day should be a recovery run. When will life get back to normal? I don't know, Zara. I'm sorry. Can't answer that question. Define normal. This is the new normal. And I think your long runs, you can push into zone 2. I think Cordula's quite good at running slow, actually. Chatting to mates. Does that mean talking to yourself? Yes, it does. Hold a conversation with yourself. Chat to the flowers, chat to the birds.
Oh, that Sam's just joined.
I think that's what we can do.
Cool.
And on that note,
yes,
I think that's our half an hour up. So you can ping any other questions to us in the comments, and we will try and answer them in the comments. And we will try and do it again next week. If not, in 2 weeks' time, we'll try and do regular ones, if nothing else, so you can keep an eye on our hair, really.
Right, we're growing it.
Yeah, Chris's hair is going nice and bouffant.
Yeah, and grey.
Ready for Lynn our hairdresser, I need maybe to get hold of some hair dye. Okay, speak to you soon. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Yeah,
and
good weekend.
Stay in touch. Bye.
Cheers.